Welcome to Batya on NewsNation. I'm Batya Ungar-Sargon, and we begin with what we learned about America this week. Graham Platner, the Nazi-tattooed, veteran-mocking, cheating, accused girlfriend abuser who Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Ro Khanna, and Zohran Mamdani lined up behind like he was the second coming, has withdrawn from the Maine Senate race after he was accused of rape by an ex-girlfriend. They finally found their line in the sand. A Nazi tattoo they could forgive. Roughing up his girlfriend, no problem. She's a Republican. Mocking veterans and cheating on his wife with 12 women? Who amongst us hasn't, they said. Living off government benefits and his rich mommy and daddy while pretending to be working class? This is just the description of your average American socialist. It was like a game show. How low will the Democrats go defending this guy's scandals? Here they are voicing their support for Platner even after the physical abuse allegations came out. But then Platner committed the gravest of sins to the Democrats. Not the alleged rape that they are pretending to drop him over. No, his real sin was that he was cratering in the polls. He was still ahead with the progressive, educated elites and the rich Nepo babies, the likes of which chose Platner in the first place. Platner was crushing his opponents, Republican Susan Collins, with the college-educated. It was working-class Mainers and men, the very people that these effeminate elites had chosen Platner to bring back to the Democratic Party, who could smell that this guy was a scumbag from a mile away. It speaks volumes about the problem the Democrats have with the people who used to be their base, people who work with their hands for a living, labor, men. Those voters have abandoned the left in droves because the things the left stands for disgust them. Abolish ICE, defund the police, free Palestine, free everything. Working class people don't want free housing or free Palestine. They want good wages, which only come from policy built on a respect for labor that is in direct opposition to the vanity morals of the elites. Rich progressives look at Graham Platner and they saw someone who embodied their stereotype of the working class, a Nazi who abuses women. But all working class people saw was, well, a Nazi who abuses women. Here's a pro tip for Democrats hoping to avoid this kind of mess in the future. The Nazi tattoo should have been enough. It really, really should have been. Mr. Platner, who is invited to join us anytime to share his side of the story, suspended his campaign in a video posted to social media in which he took absolutely no responsibility and blamed everybody else. He's clearly learned nothing. Will the Democrats? The real question they should be asking themselves post-Platner is not just how they came to justify a Nazi tattoo and violence against women. It's why do all the actual working class oyster farmers and lobstermen and flannel-wearing truckers and electricians so totally oppose their agenda that the only one they could find to support it was a faker like Graham Platner. Here with me now is Mark Penn, former White House pollster for Bill Clinton and Stagwell CEO. Mark, welcome to the show. I cannot think of someone I want to talk to about this more.
Thank you, but it's hard to say anything that you haven't said. I mean, I think you pretty perfectly captured the, and particularly at the end, it's like, why wasn't a Nazi tattoo enough? But just go back to the very notion of a senator in the Federalist Papers. The Senate was created to be a more deliberative body, more removed directly from public opinion, more thoughtful, right? Compared to the House that was supposed to be more directly responsive. That's the checks and balances built into the Republic. So how do you get behind somebody who's completely unqualified, knows nothing about the job, let alone having character of, as you said, a scumbag, and you get behind him because you have to win no matter what. And somehow you think having unqualified people like that is the way to victory.
You have to win no matter what against Susan Collins, the most moderate senator currently in American politics.
Well, and that's right. And she embodies what you want in a senator.
Right.
She's represented her state carefully. She doesn't hesitate to stand up when she thinks Trump is wrong. She votes her conscience. She's the epitome of a good senator. You would think that to defeat her, you would want to put in play someone you believe who might represent your views a little better, but would carry that kind of flag. And obviously this notion of recruiting really unknown candidates. And I worry that even reports like this, we're making Graham Platner the most famous person in America. This is a celebrity now who could live off this celebrity, and he doesn't have any accomplishments that deserve it.
The Van Man Company is taking a completely different approach to skincare. They combine the power of grass-fed tallow with one of nature's most potent anti-aging secrets, wild-caught pearl powder. This isn't just about looking younger, it's about actually supporting your eye health. So this is the eye cream, and I just wanted to show you guys what it smells like. It smells really beautiful, like lavender and lemon together, and the consistency you can see, it has this really nice, it's not gloopy, it goes on really smooth, and it feels really good on the skin. I am excited to try this, and if you want to try it too, go to vanman.shop/Batya and use the code Batya for 50% off your first order. That's vanman.shop/Batya and use code Batya for 15% off your first order. Van Man, real ingredients, no exceptions. How much does the stench of Graham Platner wear off on an Abul El-Sayed in Michigan, on a James Tallarico in Texas? How much of a downstream effect is there going to be from this?
Look, we'll really have to, we really have to see. It's a little early to kind of answer that question. I think that it does say that the Democratic Party is so desperate to win that you can't believe virtually anything it says about its candidates. I think it has undermined its own credibility in a serious way. Having said that, these races are going to be all-out battles with hundreds of millions of dollars. The Democrats have an edge in midterms going into it because the opposition party has a natural edge. But having said that, the image of the Democratic Party, and I'm going in for a poll like in the next few days, so I'll have a better sense, as I like to say, that the only thing lower than the Republicans are the Democrats.
Right, it's very well said. I wonder what you make of this, the class aspect of all of this. The people who went out there who handpicked Graham Platner, a guy named Morris Katz, a guy named Daniel Morath, these are guys equally from very fancy Nepo baby backgrounds. There's so much of this in the DSA to where the people they choose, the people doing the choosing, and then the voters themselves are part of a smaller and smaller elite of very educated, often wealthier Americans, and yet they keep wanting to cast themselves as the working class party, the working class side, when labor is running away from what they are offering. And the thing I find so amazing about this is they have 50% of the puzzle. I mean, working class people of all political stripes support Medicare for all. Like, if they were really running on that, they would be getting working class support. It's that to me seems like the beard for all of their really repulsive views, whether it's abolish ICE or free Palestine or defund the police. What do you make of this, and what does it spell for the future of the Democratic Party?
Well, the question is, what's the Democratic Party going to do with the DSA? They cannot have it as a big tent. There is not support across America for abolishing prisons, open borders. Now the DSA has just supported basically getting rid of the Constitution and replacing it with just the House of Representatives that would pick the president, right? And so there isn't a lot of support for that, but the Democratic Party has been welcoming them in, and they've been growing in support little by little. And, you know, what happened here is that the party regulars used to pick the candidates, and we said, you know what, we should put more democracy in that. Now that we put more democracy in it, it turns out that almost nobody votes in the primaries, that with social media now, they can be gamed. You can get 7–10% turnout. You could bring in 5–10,000 people, and you can have these elections won by people who are completely unqualified and have been picked like picking actors for a play, right? And so that we did not advance the system right now. We really have to grapple with the primary system and how it seems to be now have become worse than having party regulars pick a nominee.
That's such a good point. All right, you're a pollster. I want to get your take on a few polls. This came out from Pew recently. This really shocked me, Mark, I have to say. 44% of American Muslims have a favorable view of Hamas. Did you see this? I don't know what to do with this. I mean, I have a lot of Muslim neighbors. The idea that, they have a 50% chance of having a favorable view of Hamas really stopped me in my tracks. What did you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, that didn't surprise me. I was going to go back to look at the sample sizes. The Muslim population is about 1.5%. So unless they did a really extensive oversample, I don't know whether it's 44, 64, 24. But I don't actually doubt the finding. What we find is I have a question. Do you support Israel or Hamas in the conflict? And it comes out about 75-25.
Wow.
And that's 70. And so and it used to be 80-20. And I think Israel's lost about 5 points in that question over the last 6 months or so. And then you look at the 25%. And again, it will include a substantial number of Muslims, a very, very substantial number of young Democratic women in particular, and who have been affected by social media in terms of the conflict.
Terrible. All right, I want to get your take on this as well. Rahm Emanuel went to Israel and gave this speech in which he said, Israel doesn't have a democratic problem, it has an American problem. But just this week, look at this poll. GOP primary voters remain very supportive of Israel, 64% favorable, 22% unfavorable. If you look at this poll, which is done by the Free Beacon and Echelon, you find, a lot of more support for the positions that we're constantly told the GOP has abandoned, even among young people, support for Israel as an ally. 75% are more likely to support a candidate that wants a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. The favorability in the GOP among voters for Israel has not changed since October 7th. In fact, it's gone up a little bit. So it really is a Democrat problem. It's not actually an American problem, wouldn't you say?
Well, yes, actually, I've looked at these numbers pretty extensively, and the erosion in support for just a basic Israel favorable has been almost exclusively among Democrats, and particularly younger Democrats. And so when you look at those numbers, and of course, they always put Israel in isolation. Attitudes towards all institutions and all countries are down. And by the way, if you put Iran in, it's about 50 points. Israel is 50 points higher than Iran, about 60 points higher than Hamas or Hezbollah. But you are exactly right. Support for Israel among Republicans is really big, extensive, and has not changed. Despite all this stuff from Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and whatnot, I see no evidence of deterioration among Republicans in support of Israel. What we really see is it used to be a bipartisan issue, now has really become a more partisan issue in politics. And I think the left is deliberately driving it as a partisan issue across their campaigns. Among voters, frankly, when I ask people what the top issue is, the Israel conflict is about 2%.
Right.
So the left
right.
is driving
Americans
this
do
as
not
an
vote
issue.
on foreign policy. It's true. Mark Penn, God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for that wonderful conversation and for joining me.
Thank you. See you again soon.
Yes. As socialist candidates surge across the nation, they are quietly changing their party's messaging. Stay tuned to find out what their new virtue signal is this election cycle. Here's a hint. Mark Penn just talked about it. As socialist candidates continue to surge across the nation, Michigan's far-left Abul El-Sayed is running neck and neck with the moderate Democratic candidate Haley Stevens. One thing that might damage him with voters, he so far refused to release his tax returns. Why? Well, because he's a millionaire and he's hoping you won't notice. In an interview this week, El-Sayed admitted as much. Millionaires of the world unite. It's the old, I'm not a millionaire, my wife is defense. But this is typical of the kinds of people being chosen, run by, and voting for the socialists across America. It's trust fund socialism by and for the wealthy. To hide this from you, the left has adopted all manner of cunning policy proposals. Remember Defund the Police? Like many leftists, El-Sayed called for it, though now he's lying and saying that he never did. Remember the land acknowledgements, or trans women are women, or how climate change is going to destroy the globe in 12 years? These were all vanity morals of the elites designed to hide from you the fact that the left abandoned labor to cater to the educated and the wealthy. Today they use abolish ICE and free Palestine. And some go even further. El-Sayed, the millionaire, told CNN he doesn't believe any Democrat could possibly support Israel except if they were being paid to do so. Just a despicable and anti-Semitic canard. Earlier this month, he called his opponent, Haley Stevens, quote, a suit with a large AIPAC bank account, that's it. Making sure to throw in some sexism with his anti-Semitism, he added, I hope maybe they find some way to teach her how to string together two coherent sentences. Free Palestine is the new Defund the Police, a virtue signal designed to disguise the massive privilege of the left. And in 5 years, the same people making it a litmus test today will be disavowing it just like they are now to defund the police. Let's welcome to the show Melissa DeRosa, Democratic strategist and contributor at the Daily Beast, and Dan Kaninen, former presidential campaign senior aide and advisor to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Mike Bloomberg. I'm so thrilled to have both of you. All right, we're going to talk about Abul El-Sayed, but we have to start with Graham Platner because I've spoken to both of you about this at great length. Let's start with you, Melissa. You were truly, truly vindicated this week. You were one of the people, the moderate Democrats, saying from the get-go, it is better to lose than to win with a Nazi, and you got absolutely obliterated by people on the left for your very principled position. Have you gotten any apologies?
You know, it's interesting because I remember back in 2016 when there were a handful of Republicans when Trump was starting to really take off, who went out and spoke out and said, no, our party should not align with this. And the left celebrated them and said, oh, look, someone with a moral compass. And now, 10 years later, here we are trying to lead the race to the bottom. And again, he had me at Nazi tattoo. I came out strongly against Graham Platner before word came out that he was sexting with people who he wasn't married to on a site that was known to attract child predators. And before, you know, all these allegations about sexual assault, potentially physical violence, because Nazi tattoo was enough, because mocking an American soldier who was shot by the Taliban should be enough. And on and on and on. And so I feel very vindicated by what's gone on. I'm not surprised because it was very obvious that the guy was rotten to his core. And the lengths to which mainstream Democrats went to not only normalize him, but look the other way, I think sets the party and our credibility back endlessly.
So Dan, you came on my YouTube show, Prove It, twice. The first time was after the Nazi tattoo, but before the abuse allegation. You wanted him to win then. The second time was after the abuse allegation, but before the rape scandal. You wanted him to still win then. I assume now you don't want him to win anymore. But I guess my question is, were you wrong those first two times to support him, given what you know now and what so many people like Melissa could see from the get-go?
Well, Batya, I'm going to plug your show. Go back and look at that June 2nd episode of Prove It. It was a great conversation. And a lot more time, obviously, to discuss how I felt about it then. But you might recall what I said was I was really wrestling with it because I saw the problems. And I acknowledge the problems. And I also see the problem of the Republican control of the Senate and the Donald Trump agenda, whether it's with ICE, whether it's with the war in Iran and the tariffs and the gas prices and the abuse of power. And those things weigh on me and weigh on Democrats. But at the same time, at that June 2nd discussion we had, I said, look, I'm uncomfortable. And if more shoes drop here, I'm not sure how far we can go with this guy. And more shoes dropped, and quickly Democrats said, no, this is enough for us by far. He's got to get out of here. And the whole way, I agree with Melissa to the point of some Democrats and some others kind of wish casting onto Graham Platner, this idea of someone he was not because they really wanted to win the seat. I think that's probably true. But there are lots of Democrats in the establishment who never liked the guy, pushed other candidates, wanted to go a different route, and then kind of got stuck with the situation until enough was enough. You could make a good argument, Batya, that enough should have been enough a while ago, and I think it's a fair critique. But by the same token, Ken Paxton is a guy who was indicted 3 times in 2015, who was impeached overwhelmingly by Republicans in Texas in 2020. No one wanted him to run the Republican establishment, but he ran and he won. And I don't see the same agita over Republicans not calling him to drop out of the race. Democrats may have been late to this, but they did the right thing and they got him out, and they're going to move forward.
Yeah, but Ken Paxton doesn't have a Nazi tattoo, right? And it's not like the Democrats did the right thing after Platner was accused of roughing up his girlfriend. Simply because she was a Republican, she was not considered credible, right, Dan?
I think a lot of folks did do the right thing and called on him. Melissa's one of them. There are others who said the same thing. Yemisi Amewale was one stalwart champion on this point. Others wrestled with it as I did and didn't really want to give their full support. I think most of the establishment moved their attention and their money to the other races where there's great candidates like Mary Peltola in Alaska, like Sherrod Brown in Ohio, Roy Cooper in North Carolina, three really great mainstream moderate Democrats who can run and win in tough states. That's where the party really went. But look, Graham Platner owns this. He is the one who's behaved the way he's behaved. I think your point about the folks that recruited him, Dan Moreff and Morris Katz and others, they've got a lot to answer to. And particularly with Dan Moreff, if you look at his history, this is someone who promoted Jill Stein in 2012 and 2016. This is not an establishment Democrat. This is someone who's worked his entire career to take Democrats down from the left.
Right,
so
and if we could just, I want to make sure to get Melissa back in here.
That's not where it's come from.
But these are a lot of the same folks behind Abul El-Sayed. And Melissa, I just want to get your take on this. The role that Israel specifically has been playing in a lot of these races. So we have now, let's pull this up, insurgent Democrats running on Israel and AIPAC. The extent to which these leftists are focused not on Medicare for all, but on AIPAC. And look at this, Graham Platner mentioned Israel, Palestine, Gaza the most. After that is Nida Alam and then Abul El-Sayed. This seems to me to be like their current playbook, this obsession with Jews and Israel and AIPAC and Jewish money going hand in hand with this elitist playbook that's so out of touch with where your normie, even Democratic voter is at.
No, look, and I think that this is a critically important point because when I came out early against Platner, I was attacked by the left in a way, it was insane on Twitter, and everyone was accusing me of being an AIPAC shill. I've never contributed to AIPAC. I am a supporter of Israel. I do take issue with some of Benjamin Netanyahu's policies in the Middle East, but I believe Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state. And the scary thing to me is, and I really think that this started with Zohran Mamdani in New York City, where he believed that his winning path was through sort of noun-verb AIPAC. And there is something going on social media and TikTok in particular, and I think we're all going to look back and study this period of time in 5, 10, 15 years.
Totally.
The algorithm rewarding people who are getting worked up and angry and hating Israel, and this idea that everyone is an oppressor or everyone is a victim, and that plays into all of this. But they have certainly hit a chord there. And now you're seeing across the country people not just being interviewed by someone as vile as Hassan Piker, who said America deserves 9/11, who has openly trafficked in anti-Semitism, putting him alongside them on stage at an event as a surrogate. And so it's one thing to debate ideas with someone you disagree with. It's another thing to platform them and wrap your arm around them. And the reason I felt it was so important to push back on Graham Platner, and the reason I thought it was so important to push back on El-Sayed, and, I rooted for Mallory McMorrow to drop out for months. I'm so happy that she did, because now we've got a shot in Michigan to win as a moderate or left to center, is that I feel like this is not about a big tent. This is about a hijacked tent. The DSA is playing for broke. They want the soul of the party. They want to marginalize the middle. And a
That's
center.
so well put. Hijacked tent.
Yes.
Melissa DeRosa and Dan Kaninen, God bless and protect you both. Thank you so much for that wonderful conversation. Trump says the ceasefire between Iran and the U.S. is over. What does that mean for Iran's nuclear ambitions? We asked former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton. That's next. It's Schrodinger's ceasefire. This week, the president announced that the ceasefire with Iran is over.
I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
When asked what changed since the president was praising the Iranians, his answer was very simple.
Last month, you said Iranian leaders were very rational people, nice people to deal with, strong people, smart people. Today, you said they were scum, sick people, and being led by sick people. What changed, and do you think
I got to know him.
Notice Secretary of State Marco Rubio chuckling in the background there. He was never a fan of the MOU, which was negotiated by the appeaser-in-chief, Vice President J.D. Vance. So what's next when it comes to reining in Iran's nuclear ambitions? Here to discuss, I'm so honored to have John Bolton, former Trump National Security Advisor and former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So to me, it seemed like this MOU was always destined to fail for the simple reason that it revealed the Iranians have no intention of ever again allowing free trade to go through the Strait of Hormuz. It seems like they moved the theater of war from the military side, which they cannot win, to the economic side, which they cannot lose because of their willingness to absorb economic pain much higher than ours. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's still hard to understand why we weren't better prepared for the potential that the Iranians would try to close the Strait of Hormuz. This is something as an international choke point obvious to anybody who can read a map. There have been plenty of planning for this in prior administrations. And I think we still have the capability to open the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, I think the preferred outcome here is not to accept this continuing uncertainty, but to restore the blockade against the export of Iranian oil, but to use force if necessary to open the Gulf for Gulf Arab oil to come out, which would continue to help bring the global price of oil down and hopefully the price of gasoline to American consumers. We cannot leave this situation such that the regime in Tehran thinks that it can open and close the Strait of Hormuz like turning a light switch on and off. That's just unacceptable.
The problem here, it strikes me, is that on the one hand, in order to actually create some sort of stable situation with Iran, some sort of a regime change that lasts and that means the end of their nuclear ambitions, you would either have to have boots on the ground, which the American people are completely against, including on the right, or you would have to have some situation where you're arming the Kurds, perhaps with the help of Israel. There was reporting that the president nixed that plan at the behest of Erdogan of Turkey. I mean, where do you see a third option here to actually rein in Iran's nuclear ambitions, given that this is the situation?
Well, I don't think there's any option other than regime change in Tehran that will guarantee that a subsequent government doesn't pursue nuclear weapons. For 47 years now, the regime, ever since the revolution, has been determined to get nuclear weapons. There's no evidence whatever they've ever made a strategic decision to abandon that course of action. So I think regime change is critical, and I think it's critical not just to end the nuclear threat, but to end Iran's status as the world's biggest state sponsor of terrorism. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Shia militia in Iraq, and really terrorism around the world. I also think ultimately you don't get regime change unless the people of Iran are willing to take some risks themselves. This regime is extraordinarily unpopular. The economy in Iran is devastated. The young people don't like it. The women have turned against it because of the murder of Mahsa Amini and the consequences of that. The ethnic groups are upset, but the opposition needs help. And if, as you say, there's a constraint on President Trump on using American boots on the ground, then the opposition has to take a role. What we have not done to this point is really gone to all the various and somewhat disorganized opposition forces in the country and said, what do you need? What resources do you need? You need money, you need communications, you need weapons. How can we help? I think there was an effort to get the Kurds better armed and to distribute weapons among other opposition figures inside Iran before the war started. My information is that President Erdogan of Turkey, no friend of ours in my view, called Trump and said, don't arm the Kurds because of Erdogan's own feud with the Kurds inside Turkey. I think it was a mistake to stop. I think the Kurds are true friends of the United States and they're true enemies of the regime in Iran.
Part of the reason there's so little appetite among the American people for kind of regime change is because of what are seen as failed regime change wars in Iraq, for example, which you supported. Do you have any regrets about that, about how it played out, especially given the situation now, looking back in hindsight?
Well, I think you have to look at each individual country in turn. We've had a lot of successful regime change operations in Grenada and Panama. I could go down a long list. I think we did succeed in Afghanistan. Our mistake there was withdrawing in the summer of 2021. We were in a position to stop terrorist attacks on the United States while we were there. We're not in that position now. And in Iraq, I think we were very successful in the gaining the critical objective of getting Saddam Hussein out of power. Our mistake was not in overthrowing Saddam, it was in not turning responsibility for the country back over to the Iraqi people themselves more quickly. And I think as you look at each situation, clearly there are lessons to be learned. And one lesson that applies directly to Iran is to give the opponents of the regime in Iran itself, the people who will benefit directly from getting rid of these oppressors, and make sure they're deeply involved in the effort.
How confident are you that the president can land this plane and actually deal a blow to the IRGC that would result in Iran never becoming a nuclear power?
Well, I think he's put himself in a trap of his own making, because the Iranians sense that he is hostage to our upcoming November elections. Again, the critical reason for the memorandum of understanding was to get prices at the pump of gasoline down. And the regime in Tehran, I think, senses that Trump's very reluctant to have significant new hostilities before then. So we're in a bad place, a difficult place for 4 months. But after the election, there's still time to do this. If we're not going to act more robustly before November, let's use this time to work with the opposition inside Iran, with the Kurds, the Baluchis, the Azeris, the opponents of the regime across the board. And maybe by then we'll be in a better position. The regime in Iran is not solid today. It's riven by many complex disagreements, reflecting the amount of devastation we did to its leadership. And I think there's still more we can do there.
Ambassador Bolton, God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
Renewed tensions with Iran, renewing fears that gas prices are about to climb even higher. We're going to look at where things are headed. That's next. And also tune in weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern to my YouTube show, Prove It. Every day I debate a new guest on the top political stories of the day. You can stream Prove It with Batya on NewsNation's YouTube channel. You don't want to miss it. With the ceasefire with Iran over, as President Trump put it, oil prices are already starting to rise, and working-class Americans are feeling that familiar sensation in the pit of their stomachs as they pull up to the gas pump and see those prices inching back up. Should Americans be steeling themselves for prices to skyrocket again? And what does it mean for the midterms? Here with us now is the best person to address all of these questions, co-founder of Committee to Unleash Prosperity and former senior economic advisor to President Donald Trump, Stephen Moore. Thank you so much for being here. So what's the prognosis? Are oil prices about to skyrocket again?
Boy, it's so tough to predict because it changes seemingly every few days with the issue of where we are with Iran. We have seen a bump up in gas prices in the last several days because Iran is not playing by the rules. So it's, I would say, just very unpredictable. I had a friend the other day in Texas email me with a posted gas price that showed $2.89 a gallon. Whether it'll stay that low, because look, Trump wants to get that gas price well back below $3.50 a gallon, but we're not there yet, and it's all Iran.
I saw something very troubling, which is that the difference in price between oil and diesel is actually just skyrocketing. That spread is just growing. And of course, diesel is what farmers rely on. I mean, doesn't that suggest that the price of food is just going to keep going up, which is the opposite of what working class Americans are desperate to see?
Could be. I mean, you're right that fertilizer prices have risen a lot. And I think you're right to bring this up because the food prices are going to be a real challenge come later in the summer and fall, in part because of the shortage of fertilizer. Because, 40% of the world's fertilizer flows through the Strait of Hormuz. I didn't know that until recently. And so that's a real challenge. That raises food prices. And then you've got the problem with beef. We've got a cattle problem in the United States. We have less cattle now than we've had in 25 years. Partly that's because of this worm that's affected a lot of our cattle. But we need to get more, more beef in this country because people love a McDonald's hamburger, right?
I mean, it's what it means to be an American, right? All right, so what would you advise the president to do, given sort of what's going on in Iran, the uncertainty there? What's one policy position he could put in place right now that could help struggling Americans?
Well, a couple things. First of all, when it comes to what you were just talking about, food prices, my recommendation to the president is, why don't you, at least for now, suspend any of the tariffs on imported food? Because if you put a tariff on it, it's going to be more expensive. And especially fertilizer. We have a tariff on imported fertilizer at a time when fertilizer is so expensive. So we should suspend that, and that would help bring some relief. But look, mostly, Trump's policies are working. I mean, my gosh, we've got a record high stock market. We're seeing real income gains of median family income is rising faster than inflation is. That's a good thing. We've deregulated the economy. We're producing more energy than any other time. So I'm bullish on the U.S. economy. We've just got to figure out what's going on in the Middle East. We've got to get that system resolved, and Lord knows how long that will take.
Now, I have repeatedly called for a stimulus check to give the president that breathing room he needs, while also making good on his promise to working class Americans that he was going to put more money in their pockets at the end of every month. What do you think of my idea?
Well, look, Trump has done income tax cuts, and the average family this year is, in other words, we're already doing a lot of that. The average family is saving about $2,000 a year on their taxes. That's a lot because of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, the no tax on Social Security. Those have been real helpful to middle-class families. The big issue that's in play right now is, how do we get more investment in this country? What I and Steve Forbes and Art Laffer and Larry Kudlow have been talking about is, why not do allow people to sell assets that they've held on for 25, 30 years, for example, a home, and not have to pay an inflation, on the inflationary gain. That would stimulate a lot of sales, and it would free up housing. Because look, the other problem we have is, there's a housing shortage right now in America. I have a couple of sons in their early 30s. They can't afford, and they're doing fine, but they can't afford to buy a house. I bought my first house at 31 years old, $130,000. Now, that was a long time ago, but good luck for people finding a house for less than $500,000 these days.
It's so true. I wish that I heard working class people writing to me and saying, we got this great, tax cut, this tax return. I don't hear that. What I hear is, I can't afford to fill up my car with gas. I can't get out of the supermarket without spending $100, $200. And I hear from people who say it's cheaper to buy McDonald's than to cook at home. And that really breaks my heart. 20 seconds left. What do you say to them, Steve Moore?
80 to 90% of the inflation in the prices of everything from food to gas happened under Joe Biden, and it's taken a long time for Trump to get that inflation rate down. But I think we're going to see inflation. I'm going to make a prediction: by the end of the summer, we're going to see inflation less than 2%, because we have a great Fed chairman who's going to bring that inflation rate down, and that will bring interest rates down.
From your mouth to God's ears, Steve Moore. God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Get out the tissues and get ready to be inspired. A feel-good story to brighten your day. How one beautiful young boy is taking one step at a time when the odds were totally stacked against him. We'll share his story next. Welcome back to the show. We end on a story that was a real kick in the pants, a wake-up call to all of us feeling sorry for ourselves or blaming other people for our problems. It's this story from Australia. At just 13 months old, a beautiful baby boy named Ryan went into severe septic shock from strep, causing him to lose his legs. But neither Ryan nor his parents let that stop them. Just days ago, Ryan played his very first soccer game with his prosthetic legs, just in time for the World Cup. Take a look at this.
What are you doing today, Ryan? Are you playing your first game of soccer? Are you excited?
We're so proud of you, and we're all cheering you on every step of the way. It's just so amazing to see someone so young overcome so much. And it's a solid reminder to all of us never to give in to despair. Thank you so much for watching. It's been such an honor to have you. May God bless and protect you and the United States of America.